Hey, hello everybody. You might hear my notes ruffling around. Sorry about that. This video is a little bit sort of a continuation of my more recent video. The recent video that I did, 5 signs that the person you are dating is not single. And the 5th sort of sign on that last video was, do a Google search online and signs that the person, you'll find a lot of things about people online. Just public records, nothing too deep research. And then see if what he said to you verbally in person matches information that you might find about the person online. And that kind of expands beyond just finding out if the person is single, but also finding out other things like, if they have criminal records, or because unfortunately I hate to, be so, what's the word, negative, but unfortunately a lot of people have checkered pasts, and we all do. We've all done things in the past that we probably shouldn't have done, and doesn't mean it was criminal. It could be non-criminal things, but nobody is perfect. So, but unfortunately, with how common online dating is, it can be quite unsafe as well. So if you do decide to try the online dating, you really have to be careful. Meet the person in public always, particularly women, because statistics show that women are usually more the victims of violence of men. Men can also be the victims of violence of a woman, or a woman that might, swindle them or take their credit cards or things like that. So, men also have to protect themselves. Everyone has to protect themselves when you're meeting someone that you don't know. So the first thing you do is, continuation of the last video, you just Google the person's name. Put it in, I use Google. You can use any search engine. I believe the most popular one is Google. Put in the person's name. Hopefully you have the real name of the person. And many times right there, if the person has an arrest, doesn't mean they're guilty, but if a person has been arrested in many states, and you might even do that, say for example the Joe Smith arrest or criminal history or something like that, something, a few keywords, court case, something like that. And many times one of the first few results will be mugshots. Go to the images, you just scan through the images search and see if the face matches the person you went out with. Because also a lot of people have the same names. There could be, take the name Joe Smith, for example. If you have dated someone with a very common name, there might be 100 criminal records for someone with that name. Obviously, you would have to find out if there's an actual mugshot and see the image, and maybe if you get a middle name, you've got to discard the results that are not the actual person. So, it takes a little more time, a little more research, but believe it or not, and it's happened more times than, it's very common actually for people to have an arrest record. Now, again, I want to clarify the difference between an arrest record and a criminal record, because an arrest does not mean the person is guilty. And many times the person is arrested for suspicion, then they realize they don't have a case, there's really no evidence that the person actually did do what he was accused of, and they let him go. And unfortunately for that person, even though he's innocent, his mug shot stays online. And then he or she, I say he because, again, I've dated only men, but and then if the person is innocent, many times they don't bother, but they have to go through the whole process of getting the court record to prove that there was never a case, and then they have to approach the many websites by now, because then it might get posted on mugshots.com, but then other mugshot websites, there's a few of them, so they kind of go viral on all the mugshot websites. So the poor person, has his mugshot online even though he's innocent. And I have a case of a good, very, very good friend of mine that I actually dated at one time, who I know him very well, and I've known other women he's dated. I've been friends with him for many years. Never lifted a finger to me, never raised his voice to me, I know him. I know his philosophies on life, and, he's very peaceful, and, and then he started dating, many years after I no longer was dating him, but we stayed friends. Started dating kind of a nutty girl who, when they broke, finally he decided, well, gosh, she's a little bit too nutty for me, He tried to stay friends with her. That was maybe his mistake, because... And it's hard. Well, I don't want to go drawn on. Maybe I'll do another video. But basically long story short, the woman accused him of hitting her. It was a complete lie. She did it because she wanted revenge, because he no longer wanted to have anything to do with her, because she had done some kind of kooky things to him. So, anyway, his mugshot is online to this day, and, he's like, yeah, I really better. It's kind of a process. You've got to pay money. It's really so unfair, but to get his mugshot off of the internet now, he's got to go through a kind of an annoying long process, or maybe it's not so long, but it's annoying and it costs money, and, and so his mugshot's online. So now every time he meets a new woman that he wants to date, many women now Google the men that they date. His mugshot pops up, and, one or two of the women have said, hey, I saw your mugshot online. They know not to judge, and that was going to be my first suggestion, segueing into that. I'm sure other women have said, oh, mugshot, forget it, and just dumped him automatically. But, so number one thing to do, if you Google a person's name that you've dated and his mugshot pops up online, number one, don't judge. There is absolutely no connection between an arrest and a conviction. An arrest is merely taken into custody for the safety of, the person who might have accused him, and that's it. Then they do the whole process, and then it turns out there's no case, and they throw the case out, and, the guy goes free, and, he's completely innocent. So the number one thing to do, don't judge before you get more facts. Okay, so number two thing, okay, let's say you do find the mugshot online. Even before doing more research, look, because usually where there's a mugshot, there's the charges somewhere next to it. Like on mugshots.com, they'll say the person's name, the race, I think date of birth might be on there, and then charges. So what are the charges? Is it, something of a violent crime? Was it maybe possession of less than, and then of course that's where your own moral values come in as well. In my case, if a man I dated was caught with 0.5 ounces of marijuana, something for personal use, in my case, I'm like, who cares, if you are completely against any kind of, marijuana or any kind of drugs, then, you might decide that's too much for you to handle or whatever. Still, you shouldn't judge, because it could be that the evidence was planted, the marijuana was planted on him, by the police, or who knows. But again, so in my case, let's say I find the mugshot on there and I say, okay, arrested, possession of 0.5 ounces of marijuana. In my case, I don't care if it's true or not, because it's really not an issue for me. He, all right, so he probably bought a little bit, he's personal use. I'm not in favor of it. I don't support marijuana for recreational use necessarily. For medicinal purposes, I think I am on the side of accepting. But even if it was for his own recreational use, let's say I only found the one mugshot, the one charge, and I didn't find anything else, I'd probably be more like, okay, fine, whatever, I don't care. And I would leave it at that. Now, but if it's a charge that's more serious, for example, violence, robbery, something serious, credit card theft, and I have stories that I'll have to do a separate video for that, of people I have found with records such as the ones I'm describing. It really, I don't think it's uncommon that people get arrested, actually. But anyway, or I've just had bad luck and I date men that, have met men online that happen to have records. But anyway. So number 3, okay. So after that, let's say you found the mugshot, there's a charge, and you decide, well, this charge is serious enough against my moral values for me to further research. Now, personally, if it were a violence charge or assault with a deadly weapon charge or, something very serious, personally, I would say that's serious for everyone, because your own safety could be involved if you continue dating the man. So you have to make sure it's not true, or whatever. Or so number 3, this is where you can kind of, maybe 3 and 4 are sort of interchangeable. And even, actually all of these are interchangeable, because it really is up to each person. But the steps I go through are: number 3, okay, let's say it was an assault with a deadly weapon charge. Let's say it's something really serious, or, a domestic battery or something like that. Then I would say, okay, again, I'm still not judging at this point, but you think to yourself, okay, how much do I really like this person? That's my next step. Your next step might be, well, let's see if it's true first, and then I'll decide if I really like the guy. And it's important at this step to decide, am I making my decision based on my bias now that I know that he's been arrested for a charge that I don't know if it's true or not? Or am I really being serious? So you have to be very objective at this stage. So number 3, how much do I really, really want to continue seeing this person? That would make it worth going through a little more effort to find out more, whether it's true, whether it's not true, etc. So, but let's say, I really like the person. I hope that these things aren't true. And here's another thing to be careful of, which is sort of a number 4, but it's still mixed in with number 3. Make sure the charge has no influence on your decision whether or not you like the person, whether it be negative or positive. Because, for example, some women find it exciting. Oh, he assault with a deadly weapon. Wow, he's a, some women are attracted to the sort of the bad guy, the bad boy, So be careful there too. Not only do you decide if you like the guy enough to pursue and find out if you should stop dating him because he might have a criminal record, also be sure you're not pursuing a relationship with the person because it's exciting to you. Oh, he's a bad boy, so it goes both ways. You really have to be very objective and decide, if I would not have known any of this, and that's hard to do for many people, but, try to do that. So, okay, let's say you get through that process and say, okay, I do like the person. All this other stuff, not influencing. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. And I have a story on this as well. I have a gentleman that I dated that I liked in spite of finding a mugshot, and I'll tell you that in my next video. So that's why I'm speaking from experience here, because I have had this happen enough times. So, okay, so you've gotten through the steps 3 and 4, whether sort of 3 and 4 are mixed together. So number 5, okay, you've decided at this point that yes, it's worth pursuing. If you already decided, well, whether it's true or not, I don't really care, because I wasn't too crazy about the guy anyway. So, maybe just sort of before you've gotten too deep, and keep going on dates, just don't accept any more dates or whatever. Just very since you don't know if the guy's guilty or not, just don't even mention the mugshot thing, because it's not even worth mentioning. And if it turns out he really is guilty of that serious crime, you don't want to make him mad. So just, just kind of let things drop. If he hasn't called you, don't text him, don't pursue him anymore, and sort of, back off however you usually do, without pointing out the mugshot. Don't even bring it up, because I don't think you should bring it up until it's really necessary to. So, okay, so the next step. Now, here's where you can find out more in some states than others. You go online to find the court records, which in some states, Florida, it's very easy. The clerk of courts, or you maybe would Google in your own state county, like county criminal records or county court records, and the name of your county, if you don't know what website to go to. So go to the court records website. Clerk of courts is usually the place where you would find those things. So this is all online, and it's all free research, and it's all public record. So you're not doing anything particularly invasive against what is legal at this point. I mean, you should never do anything illegal, but you are being kind of snooping. But some would say, oh, well, they have a right to privacy. Well, you have a right to protect yourself from strangers that you're meeting online. And if it's public record, then it's all fair game. They can also Google you if you have a record, or if you've done stupid things, and even if you don't have a record, but anything stupid you've ever done might find its way online somehow. So, we're all in the same boat here. Okay, that's my personal opinion. So you'll go online to the clerk of courts, see if you're able in your state. Some states are more private than others. So right there you can find certain court records or dockets, which won't actually detail the cases, but will detail what cases were brought. But oftentimes you can find out the whole case right there online. You'll find all the filings, the motion to this, the motion to that. If maybe you have to understand a little bit how cases work in the courts, but it's basically a lot of papers that are filed by the opposing lawyers, and one says one thing, one says no, a rebuttal, stuff sort of like it. Then they go to trial, and there's a final judgment at the end of the whole back and forth with these different papers on opposing sides that are filed. There's a final judgment at some point. So you can try to skip to the final judgment if it's that if you don't feel like reading through the cases. But sometimes it's interesting to read through all the paperwork if it's there. And there's appeals also. Sometimes you don't find all of the papers, but you can find an appeal, which many times there's information in appeals. Just read. Yeah, you've got to be willing to read a lot, because if the case is very serious, there's probably going to be a lot of reading and a lot of papers, and you might try to skip right to the final judgment if you can find that and see what they'd resolved. But it's still in your interest to read the previous papers if you can, because there's more information in there that might not be in the final judgment. The final judgment basically takes all those papers from before and says, okay, based on all the previous papers, we find him not guilty, period. And it doesn't give details. So, you can find out things, witnesses might have spoken, and things might pop up that his wife, testified, and or something, or a girlfriend or something. So, one second, I'm going to let the dog out. So every time I have to cut off, I forget where I was. But now, oh yeah. So you would skip to the final judgment and read backwards. It might be a good way to do it for more details. And then, again, you have to use your own judgment at this point. I can't say, but just be careful, because if it was, just like I said, a person can be arrested and completely innocent, and there's no case, and the case gets dropped. If it goes to trial, again, it doesn't mean that the person is guilty, but if it goes to trial, it means that there was enough evidence to suspect that the charges were true. So it's a little more serious, but it still doesn't prove that the person is guilty. It just means that, okay, there is evidence here that makes us believe that there is a case. So that makes it a little more serious. And then, okay, go through the case. And at the end, the final judgment says the person is not guilty. Again, sure, he was found not guilty. That doesn't mean he was innocent of the charges. Just like if he was found guilty, it doesn't mean he was, what did I say? Not, he could be found guilty and he's completely innocent, but unfortunately the evidence showed otherwise or whatever. Or he could be found not guilty and he actually might really have been guilty. We never know. But, you look at what the evidence, if you can, again, from the paperwork and see. So, you don't know. And that's just one case. Now, if there's more than one arrest for something and then it gets dropped, again, I know it's so hard. I wish I could just give you a formula that this is how it works. But since each situation is different, there are people who are maybe arrested for domestic violence 3 or 4 times now and never went to trial because maybe we know of cases where a wife might accuse a husband of domestic violence. Let's say the man used to be married and then they ended up getting divorced, for example. So maybe you go in there and you find four mugshots that the guy was accused of battery of his wife or girlfriend, but it never went to trial. Okay, sure, it never went to trial doesn't mean he's innocent either, because sometimes we know wives or girlfriends will drop the case. They'll say, no, all right, I changed my mind. I accused him, but let's just, so it's very iffy at that point. So I'd say if there's just one mugshot, it didn't go to trial, and, all the other things I said before, maybe be cautious, always be cautious with whoever you know. There are men who don't have any arrests and could be a murderer, because they never got caught. So it's just so difficult. I guess this isn't helping anyone because I'm just talking from my experience. But at least you're aware, you're more alert that it's something that could be, and it might end up not being true. And most likely, if it was, I'm going to say, if it was just one arrest one time, and again, using the example of my friend who I know that the woman lied. I had met the woman. She was crazy. She was obsessed with him, dating him after dating him a little while. He felt uncomfortable to continue dating her and he wanted to break up. And so she did whatever she could to keep him. And when it didn't work, she lied and said that he beat her just sort of out of revenge. And so, I know that there are many cases, I know that there is the case of my friend where he was arrested for hitting his girlfriend, which I know was a lie. He did not hit her, and, But anyway, so if it's just one arrest, you might think, okay, it could be a situation like that. Otherwise, if it's several arrests and none of them went to trial, I don't know. I would be suspicious anyway, because I'm saying, well, okay, if he got accused once and it didn't go to trial, you could say, okay, it was a lie, the woman lied or whatever. But 4 times being accused, yeah, and especially maybe they're different women, or even if it's the same woman, there's obviously something weird going on. Maybe, I don't know. I would be uncomfortable. At that point, I might, do more research if I really liked the guy. Or if I wasn't too crazy about the guy anyway, I'd probably say, let's just kind of not pursue this, and not even tell him that I found all his mugshots. So So really, there's no set formula. You've got to use your own judgment, but please try to be objective because this is your safety at stake here. Your physical safety in the case of, usually in the case of women, in the case of men too. In the case of men, many times the mugshots or the things you might find in the court records, even if you don't find a mugshot, you may as well go to the clerk of courts and see, look in family court, civil court, and criminal court. Look in all three. Sometimes they store them differently. In the case of men, I would guess that the danger is more of the woman doing like credit card theft or identity theft or, you know, some kind of swindling for his money, you know, or, you know, there are horrible, very, very serious cases where the woman gets the guy to fall in love, they get married, and she takes out life insurance policy on him and then has him killed. So, and women do that to men too. And, you know, there, if you watch these shows that I watch, you know, like on, you know, the mystery murder channels, and Discovery ID is one that I watch, and there's one I saw, Deadly Alibi. You know, I watch a lot of these criminal crime mystery murder shows, so, you know, I might be a little bit, but, you know, they're based on true stories. So, and credit card theft is very common. That's extremely common. And so, you know, you don't want that either. Maybe it's not a danger to your life, but it's, you know, it's unpleasant and it could ruin your credit for the rest of your life. So it does affect your life. You know, always think about who you're dating will affect those around you, how the dangers that they could pose to someone near you, your children, or usually, yeah, it's your children because the others around you would be adults. But, and let me look at my notes here because I didn't want to. Oh, I was telling you how you might want to bring it up at some point if it's warranted. For example, if it were a court case and it went to trial and the person was found guilty, or even if it was found not guilty. And then, yeah, bear in mind, if you bring it up, it'll still be sticky if it did go to court, because then you'll have to admit to the person that you were searching through the internet and you found his court case, and so that you run the risk of that person getting angry. Oh, well, you're invading my privacy. You searched through all my records, and now you know, you should have trusted me, and you know, so. You know, unfortunately, it brings up a whole other slew of things that you'll have to consider. So you decide whether or not to bring it up. But I think if it's something that went to trial and he was found guilty, or even if it was found not guilty, at least be aware of it and look for signs, you know. But yeah, unfortunately, it's tainted no matter what, you know, even if the person is 100% innocent and just had bad luck with the case. Unfortunately, your view on the person is going to be a little bit cautious, as it should be, and it's unfortunate for that person, but you have to think of your own safety. So, you know, and if the person really cares about you and loves you, maybe, hopefully they'll understand, listen, I'm meeting strange men online. I can't risk, you know, not looking up some information about them. So, aside from the other things you might find, like I mentioned in the previous video, you might find out the person's married, you know, and other things that are less serious than an actual criminal case. I think that was the end of my notes for this one, because the next video is going to be about the actual people that I have met or chatted with from online that turned out to have mugshots and worse. So I hope you'll tune in for that video. I'll be uploading that one soon. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.